Welcome to our special Herriman City Safety Enforcement Area meeting. We've got Mayor Watts on the phone, Sherry and I. Clinton and Nicole are excused. We've just got one item on the agenda. Gordon.
Yeah, so when RDAs are represented or done in cities, one of the things they do is go to each of the boards and talk about the willingness of each of those agencies to participate in in redevelopments and funding. And so we're putting together the innovation district. And so what we thought would be valuable is just to have some discussion, not necessarily total policy we're going to have going to the future, but maybe that comes into it. But this specific one, we're in the middle of right now getting approvals with each of the other taxing agencies. One of the questions that's come up nearly every time is, what is the city's participation? And there's concern if the city doesn't participate. So we also are sensitive to the fact that this is
the city participates.
Well, the city participates 100%.
The law enforcement service area.
Yeah, and that's what they look at the two as the same thing. And so
they shouldn't.
They shouldn't, but they do. So that has come back to a couple questions. We need to go back to each of these agencies and fill in that blank. If we're not going to participate, I know that's going to cause a ripple effect in what they're going to provide for us.
So I'll just start off finding out some of this information today and kind of where that stemmed from. It sounds like some conversations need to be had with some of those board members about certain things, but I've prepared several bullet points that I've tried to bounce off a few people today. I'll just go down those if that's all right. So kind of a few things I wrote down. First thing is that this agency is not even a year old, right? At least our police department. HCC officially, are we a year old?
Oh yeah, we're
year and a half,
I think, because we started in January, didn't we?
Yeah, so this will be 2 years at HCC itself. As far as collecting funds, like we're pretty much brand new, so a new agency to commit funds with any number of unknowns, especially not knowing it, in previous agreements, not knowing what fallout would be with UPD, that separation, our startup, etc., didn't seem prudent to commit funds to something when we're starting up, and we're kind of still in that phase. Even having successfully started up, there are still some unknowns. So for some of those board members, I think I probably need to talk to. It sounds like HCC borrowed funds from Herriman City General Fund and still owes that money back. And we're waiting for the pending lawsuit with UPD to know what that settlement's going to be and be able to repay those funds. Until that is settled or UPD decides to return Herriman City taxpayer money to HCC for the police department, same thing, it would be kind of irresponsible for us to commit future funds when there's that looming debt that really is still there. And they might see that as one and the same. We do not. They're separate entities, and we created them as separate entities for a reason. Next thing would be that other entities in that same body that are objecting to this, like the shoes on the other foot, their safety enforcement areas are not contributing to agreements that were already approved by this same body. Why are they going to treat us differently? I guess how I would look at that one. Another issue would be that in this particular area, we're continuing to get, it sounds like, a frequent number of non-emergency requests for help from surrounding agencies, and we as a good neighbor provide that. This would help offset that. And this is also an area of Herriman City where there's likely no residential homes to pay that cost. This is the only thing that's out there. Any calls that are out there that are in our city would stem from this. And then my kind of last thing I think on my list right now would be that the Innovation District benefits, how at least we look at it, as the reason we're creating it and asking for it, that benefits our city the most. And these are the reasons is that we feel that it's necessary to exclude the safety enforcement area while still committing the city to participate fully.
Okay.
No,
I can type all that up for you to send to whoever we need to.
I think just to reiterate too that remind them that the city is participating. Those are two separate things. The city is participating, but our safety enforcement
I have one more thing to add, Mike,
No,
sorry,
it's that number.
I skipped over it. Got one more, is that, to go back to kind of the pending lawsuit, is that part of what we've been dealing with is for a number of years, we were underserved. Herriman taxpayer money was, we know this now for sure, was going to other areas. We've been underserved, and part of our plan is to catch up on that, and that's another reason that the funds that I've talked about, we kind of view as sacrosanct to get us to where we really should be, what Herriman taxpayers who are here have already paid for.
And I think those are great arguments. I think one of the issues we'll have to wrestle with is we will need to go to each of the agencies, not just, when we talked about earlier, but the county, the school district. And I think
a lot of the same board members on every.
yeah, the school and the county.
So I think the biggest
councils
one
are
is
gonna
like, and I had a brief conversation with Mayor Staggs, but I mean, Release is not, they have their big CDA and Release is not participating, UFA signed off on it, why are we being treated differently?
Right, and I know, but I also know that we'll be hit up with the other one, so, and so what's at risk is a possible $7 million, and we're gonna have to go renegotiate with each of them if we don't have anything to participate out of it. So if we're gonna make the decision of no participation, it is going to be the main point, probably the only point we're gonna have to address with each of these other organizations to get their funds. They're gonna see that as a stumbling block. So it puts us in a little bit of a difficult position.
So do you think it's a responsible position for us to participate?
So I think the issue is this district is going to service, our intent is 1,000 acres of industrial, and that's huge for the policing district. The cost to get this started is, of course, the city has approved, we spent the first half of $3 million to get the water system going. We may have to end up eating that cost. There's a $3 million sewer line extension that has to happen for this property to develop. It's not currently on the sewer district's plan to do immediately, so if we need to get that going, we're gonna have to find other funding sources. Those are things we can come up with as a city outside of a CDA, but the sewer district now is coming back to us saying this needs to be elevated, this is what you're going to have to do. And so part of the intent was this to help bring that, and then some road improvements.
Is this the only entity that we approach with this first? Is this the first one?
No. The other ones all anticipate that we're going to have this all as part of our discussion. So if we come back and say it's
I meant, is this the first one that we've brought this to?
particularly,
So the innovation district, with this particular board that has raised this issue, is this the
This is the first one we've done with the HCC.
As part of, yeah,
The first redevelopment.
in the existence of HC.
So proposing the innovation district itself has the school district signed off, has the sewer board, et cetera.
with the idea that we are participating in HCC. If we don't participate, we'll have to go back and renegotiate our contract. So they're anticipating that we're going to anticipate, that we're participating out of HCC. That's the school, the county,
Well, that's
each
kind of
of the
another
boards. It's all the boards.
element that I don't think,
No,
at least I didn't
yeah.
understand that was the issue.
So they're anticipating that we're going to participate, and we're going to have to justify the level.
And was that, so I guess my question's more a technical one as far as who has signed off and on what language? Because Herriman City is Herriman City, it's not HCC, and if entities have said, yep, we sign off, and
Well, they sign off with the understanding that everybody's gonna chip
So
in.
the school is in their next board meeting. We are meeting with the county staff, I think, next week, and they're anticipating that we're gonna show, we agree HCC is a different entity than the city. To a lot of the boards, if they saw that we went in there and the Salt Lake Fire Board didn't participate, they would question us, why are we participating if you can't get another board to participate? So even though HCC is different than the city, they look at it as a closer tie than the other boards, and if any of the boards come back to zero, other than mosquito abatement, we have to go in and do a lot of explaining why any board besides mosquito abatement.
when I hate to do this to any neighbors that have maybe existing agreements that say what's the Lisa's part of, but now it's HCC and Lisa, and that agreement is still in place and Lisa's excluded. Again, why would we be treated differently?
For the
Or Or is that or is that, like I said earlier, is that just a matter of education and more of, elected official
It could be, I
conversations
think for
outside
that
of-
agency has raised that issue, but each of the agencies have told us they anticipate that we're gonna be bringing back an agreement that shows some participation. Now, the actual level of each of them is left to us. I suspect that, a couple we have suggested an amount, they felt that wasn't enough, but we have talked about that, but it hasn't been in any agreements at this point.
So what's a responsible level to participate besides zero?
So that's what I think we wanna talk about a little bit. So the full amount that we get with all the agencies participating is about $7 million. The amount, and this is, everything I'm gonna quote came from a responsible person, Troy Carr, is that,
let's rephrase it this way before we go to that. Are there any other partners any other agencies that would participate at a lower level than 100%?
so each of these, the only agency participating 100% is Herriman City. But it's such a small amount that they don't value it too much.
Okay.
So we have the school district at 50%. We have each of the other partners at 75. And I think,
Including the county?
including the
75.
county and the school and the library. And so your comments, Jared, are very poignant and correct. The thing that I think needs to be looked at is that currently our HCC is getting from the area about $14,000, or how much was it a year?
$1,400.
$1,400 a year. And our service out there is nominal. You know, we have 118th, we probably police a little bit, but it's not heavily, the police volume call is very close to not very much. It's not much.
Very good.
The question is, what would it increase to?
Yeah, and so what would happen is Troy has talked to neighboring communities of similar facilities, and the call volume will go up. And I think there's two kinds of calls. Troy went in for ones that are specifically to the facility, and that probably is 5 to 10 calls a year, plus or minus, depending on lots of things. But there's other things that are going to happen. We're going to increase the traffic on 118th. It's going to have some more things with Troy. There's going to be other things. And so there is going to be an impact to him
Correct.
that he doesn't have today.
And we looked at the type of calls that would happen at the facility as being the one and done call. A patrol officer goes out there and it's handled, and other things that take investigative, some length of investigation that goes to detectives. There weren't very many of those, really at all. It was mostly going out there. But Gord's correct in that not only will this impact the facility and us, but things that turn out onto 118, like car crashes and those kind of things, that we will see it change, right? We know that. However, in looking at these other agencies, it wasn't a dramatic call load, and it was in a busier area than out there. So, those are some of the things we
So
investigated.
what this will generate per year for HCC is about $156,000. So every year, once this is in place, they get $156,000.
For how many years?
For this, the proposal is 15 years. After that, it's still 100. Well,
Well,
let me.
156,000 would be the entirety of it. What you're speaking of would be the deduction of percentage, right?
Mhm.
So, and that would be dependent on what you would decide it to be, and that would decrease that 156,000.
So if you did 10%, I have a calculator, but it's probably $15,000.
$15,600.
Yeah.
$15,600, and so forth, and that's per year. But in talking to Troy, and these are really rough numbers, and it's about $160,000 to $180,000 per officer. Now he could tell you the exact number, and you could too, Jared. And I'm not going to guess, but it's in that range to have a full officer.
Right.
And so I think initially, you're not going to have a full officer necessity at that point. Now, I'm speaking as a non-police person. and I'm not going to have you take,
No, police spokesperson.
non-police, nothing to do with police at all, other than just trying to take Troy's money. So
I wonder what's gonna come out of his mouth.
So I'd expect you
Doesn't
to,
help you either.
I know, well, I'm gonna call it out, and so I'm just saying, tonight's not the night you have to decide something, but I do want you to ponder.
I'd say we're willing to consider it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is, I think the purpose of having this HCC meeting was to schedule an HCC meeting 2 weeks from now. Was to basically give you some thoughts to think about, some talking points. Troy has got numbers that I think will be good for you to hear, to see. I want you to just have this as an idea. If we were to be, so when we did the auto mall, we're not proposing anything coming from Troy. When we are doing the Anthem HCC thing, zero coming from Troy. This town center, zero coming from Troy. When we're doing those are all,
They had a lot of more impacts.
but zero from that. So what I'm saying is, I believe from us, we need to be extremely careful on public safety. And I don't have Riley here, but I'm.
Riley's here?
Oh, sorry, Riley. I think
Sorry, Riley.
police and fire are what the public expects you to be
Amen.
sensitive to. And if you aren't sensitive to them, you're not doing your job. So I'm totally getting that. But I also think in talking and spending multiple hours with Troy, and there's a point where you have to invest in the future. Things have to be different. We have to have this innovation district. This is critical to our city. It is something that may take some sacrifice and pain. And I think there is a case for doing this kind of a district that really benefits public safety, benefits our residents, benefits traffic, benefits air quality, benefits so much that I think it merits a consideration. Not saying what you should or shouldn't do, but I think you have to take this into consideration, stack it together, and let's figure something out. That's my comment.
Now, given the situation, I think you're right. As far as that goes, I'll voice publicly, I am annoyed because this shouldn't be the case. If our representation was what it should have been on that board, this wouldn't be an issue.
Oh, for sure, I agree with that.
If I can just say really quickly, I agree with everything you both have said, and very, very good points. I think it's a very slippery slope to go down when we start talking about the only thing that funds your law enforcement and taking away from that. However, much to Gordon's point, when we look at the growth of the city, and I've said this before, we have to be visionaries for what's to come, right? Well beyond us. This is a 50-year plan that I'm trying to build with this police department. And I believe that these exact things in this specific instance would lend to us with better recruitment and retention for our officers to know the city is growing. I want to go there. I want to work. I want, it's going to be vibrant and built out. So for that reason, yes. But again, it's a slippery slope to go down, and I will always come in here and fight that we be very, very cautious with that. And as public safety, UFA for instance, when a fire truck rolls on a call, the police go with them almost all of the time. It isn't the same on the other side. When a police car rolls on a call, it doesn't mean that fire's going with it. So I tend to be a little bit protective of the funds, as you can imagine. And it is my job, as Councilman Henderson pointed out, to play catch up a little bit from where we were, right? And that catch up means we need to put some bodies in the city. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to do that if we're diminishing that funding source. But in this case, the math that I've done so far makes sense. It really does. And I wouldn't be saying that if I truly didn't believe it. I would be having an entire different story.
And so then the issue is setting a precedence, right? It's like we want the precedence simply to be that we're gonna very carefully look at each situation case by case.
The precedent should be that there isn't a precedence about this.
Okay, good.
That this is very, very individualized, and that it has to be an advantage to us, or it wouldn't be something we discuss, right?
Right.
That's
So,
kind of my.
this really shouldn't be happening, but because it is, to get it done, then we'll do what we have to, and the numbers are what they are. And
It's an exception, right?
It's an exception in this
There
case,
you
Right.
but
Yeah.
yeah, like those difficult conversations need to be had going forward for all the things that you just said, because you do this now. And we get to those, and you ask for it, and they say, no, this is what we did.
I don't want that to be the direction of our HCC. That's not what I want to do with this. So my thought would be is, we want this to be the full board. It'd be good to have everybody here, and I think what we'd like to do is maybe reschedule this in a couple weeks and come back and talk to you and let you vet this out the way it should be vetted. And I think your strongest arguments should be why we keep this in HCC. But I think there needs to be an exception at times, and that's the only reason we're bringing this to you. And so we are letting you consider it, and then let's come back and talk about it in a couple weeks.
Any other discussion?
Supportive of that path.
What?
He's supportive of it.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'll make a motion to adjourn the Herriman City Safety Enforcement meeting.
We have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
That was pretty quick, man.
Well, it's assets. It's not bad.
It's not bad. It's not bad.
Sherry, those registrants send us some. It's not the process.
Okay, perfect. Is there another, there's a weird comment about $300 their code change.
Well,
What am I talking about?
Oh, I thought we were done.
I gotta refresh my memory.
We're done.
I do remember, we were talking about.
Yeah, Simeon is only doing like hot item issues, big things that we need somebody to respond to other than.
Yeah. Well, she sent me a,